Hi everybody, and welcome to another on-demand webinar from Bitdefender. My name is Nathan Eames. I'm head of EMEA Cloud and MSP. In fact, I joined Bitdefender back in January 2020, but have been in the industry for 25, 26 years now. I've worked in a number of vendors and also distributors. So through my entire career, I've always focused on partners, and actually any type and flavor of partner that you can think of and imagine, I've been involved with. I'm joined this afternoon by Heather. Hey, Heather.
Hello, I am Heather Harlos. I'm the Global Marketing Manager of Cloud and MSP at Bitdefender. I believe me and Nathan actually started here on the same day back in January of 2020, which we like to say is when all the best people at the company started. I don't know if it's true or not. But I have been in the industry for 15 years, working both from a business operations side as well as a go-to-market strategy side. I've had roles from overseeing the global digital strategy at a larger distributor to building the go-to-market strategy for the cloud business at another one. Something fun about me, just because I like to have a little fun fact, is that I consider myself nerd chic and love going to Dragon Con every year, and I do cosplay at that event.
So you're sharing a bit more than me there then, Heather.
Just a little bit.
Okay, so before I move on, I thought also important to say that the reason we put this on-demand webinar together, this deck together, is that we're getting an increasing amount of organizations coming to us wanting to know more about our MSP portfolio and how they can actually get involved in a monthly recurring revenue model. So hopefully for all those organizations that are interested in making this move, this is going to be really informative and important for you guys. So in terms of the agenda, I'll quickly scan through this. So we'll look at some analysis and look at market trends and demands. We'll also look at the model definitions, so the different partner types that are out there, how you can change from any one of those partner types and move more towards an MSP type organization and offering. And probably more importantly is why you would actually want to do that and why you would want to make that change. And then finally, we'll wrap up and we'll talk about some of the tools that we can help you to be successful in this space. So Heather, would you like to take the market trends and demands?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's really important before you decide what kind of business you want to be in or what kind of business model you want to have, what's the market telling us and what do you need to be prepared for? So the first thing we want to look at is just the general industry as a whole and what's happening there. So if you look at the graph, what you're going to see is that technologies and individuals are actually outpacing the businesses that they serve, as well as the public policies that they have to stay up to date with. What this means is that businesses are having to adapt and transition to meet end user demands, which is a different position than what we had seen historically. If we move on to the next slide, then what you're going to see is what's happening in the channels. So like I said, I came from distribution. I cut my teeth there. And even when I first started in distribution, there was a standard of vendor creates technology, give it to the distributor, reseller sells it, end user is happy with what they get and it's what they expect. Well, if you actually look at what's happening now, there's actually a gap between end user expectations and where the resellers are with the technology they're offering or what the way they've even thought about selling it. So as distributors grow and resellers evolve, what you need to do is move from that I sell a specific piece of technology to I sell a solution. So you're actually moving from product salespeople to solution aggregators to fill the digital transformation gap that's being created by the end user expectations with what they're expecting to consume and how they're expecting to consume it.
Perfect. Thank you, Heather. That's really, really interesting, and I think will shape how these organizations are going to think about their business model moving forward. Now that you've got some additional insights into the industry, from an end user perspective, but also from a channel perspective as well, and understanding actually what it is that those organizations or the end user organizations are asking for. they're wanting to purchase outcomes and not tools, kind of specifically. And they're also looking to consume IT on that monthly basis. So this comes back to you, yourself and the organization that you're in. And does your business model scale? Does it have that flexibility and that scalability to keep that evolving constantly and responding quickly to your customers' wants and needs? Heather, was there anything that you wanted to?
Yeah, I'll add to that. And I think you can think about it how you like to consume technology now. So let's just think about the entertainment industry. Historically, we used to expect to go to a cable company, a satellite company, you buy this huge package with all these channels, and you may watch 5% of it. Well, now I don't know many people that even subscribe to cable packages anymore. They do Hulu, they do Netflix. So that huge bill that you were paying to get 10% of the shows that you actually want to see on it is now down to $10 a month, $20 a month, because we want to control the money we're spending, but also we expect to get what we want on demand. And that really is what's changing the industry. Everything and all the expectations from end users are now for things to be on demand, get what they want when they want it, and really no more than that.
Perfect. Nicely summed up. So on to the next slide. So talking about game-changing business trends. So this actually is based on the feedback that we're getting from customers and what they're telling us they want. So they are looking to partner with an organization that can not only understand the technology needs of the organization, but actually their business pains and their business issues. A lot of these small customers don't have an IT department themselves, let alone a CIO or a CTO. So they will be coming to you as basically their IT department to understand the issues that they face as a business. So, understanding the requirements and issues that they've got from a technology and business perspective, as I mentioned, but also help them understand the best way that they can move forward and not just be a generalist, but also an expert to help them be successful from a day-to-day operational and technology point of view. In terms of the different definitions in the partner types or the models, so there are three main ones here. You can probably identify yourself immediately, or maybe you're a little unsure as to where exactly you might sit. But also you may well be doing something here, maybe in the MSP space without actually realizing it. So VAR, the value added reseller, I guess you could argue is more on the traditional side and have been around for a number of decades now. And they're focused generally on product, and they are doing annual perpetual licenses with a renewal point to that offering. We've also got the CSPs, which are the cloud solution providers. They're actually moving away from that annual perpetual. They are still selling a product, however, but they're also focused on monthly and potentially, depending on the vendors that they might be working with, on the hourly pricing as well. And then finally, we come on to the MSP, the managed service provider. So they're able to offer even more granularly. So they've got hourly, monthly, or annual. But actually, they're not selling the product on its own, in its own right. They're actually selling complete wraparound service. So in a lot of cases, many organizations don't actually know the vendor that the MSP is promoting, because that's not what they're buying. They're buying that complete service from that MSP, and then it will be the MSP to decide what is the best technology for them, the best technology to protect those customers. And that actually comes part and parcel of their overall offering, as opposed to selling point products. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that one at all, Heather?
Yeah, the only thing I would add, and in my head, the way I break it down is, are you an extension of the company, or are you selling bodies on a project basis? So when you're an extension of the company and you're there actually supporting them and maintaining the solutions that you install, I think that's the easiest way to think through that transition from VAR to CSP to MSP. Where when you think of CSP or MSP, you're really selling the product, but from a support standpoint, you're essentially outsourcing a body, but not actively part of that company.
Perfect. Which leads us nicely on, how can we evolve? How can we change? So, what we've been through, and I appreciate this is very high level at the moment, but we don't want an on-demand webinar to run for hours. So if any questions come up, you want to get in contact, then please feel free to do so. But now you're understanding what the demand is, what are the end user organizations asking for, understanding the different business models that are out there and how you can actually move to define your own offerings to be more MSP orientated. So what we'll talk about is what are the steps to actually make that change? How do we go from a VAR into a CSP or a CSP into an MSP? Or as I say, maybe you're already offering some solutions in the MSP model, and how do you actually expand that and take more of your services to market in that fashion? So I think there are 4 key areas that you would need to review internally and understand. So from a cash flow perspective, so are you just going to take that traditional model and instead of billing on an annual basis, move that actually to monthly? Or are you going to go all in, so to speak, and do this on an on-demand usage, which is, what we would call the proper monthly recurring revenue and subscription model? From a reporting perspective, how do you measure success, and how do you measure and manage growth, and how do you target your individuals in a way that everybody can agree with? Are you going to just, as I say, annualize that monthly revenue, or actually looking at it from a 3-year perspective, or do you just keep that on a monthly recurring basis? And also, would you potentially do this in a hybrid model? If that is the way that you decide to go, then you would just need to be aware that you're going to run 2 separate accounting practices and 2 different routes to market. Or do you actually go all in and focus on offering services and go down that subscription route, which is very similar to what Adobe did? If you read about that, they made that bold step and they wanted to move everything from perpetual and move into a subscription. And the effect on their share price was extremely positive, actually. Wall Street, if you like, loves recurring revenue. Then in terms of bonuses, defining your compensation plans. So before now, I've worked with organizations and, we can call them a VAR because that's absolutely what they were, but they wanted to dip their toe in the subscription water, so to speak. They wanted to do that with a safe vendor. So we proceeded to enable them on the offerings that we had available, but actually they didn't sell any. They just did not sell any. And we realized when we looked back and tried to get to the root cause of that issue, it was because they weren't compensating their sales staff in any different way to sell SaaS or subscription. So all of the sales individuals in that company were more than happy to continue doing annual deals or 2-year or 3-year because they knew it was going to retire more quota. So that's definitely something you need to think about and get that right to actually incentivize and get your guys focused on this to help you grow in that space. And then in terms from a rollout point of view, is to enable everybody within your organization so that they are all on board and they absolutely get the benefits of moving in this direction as an organization and going into that subscription platform, and so they understand what that brings to your organization. Heather, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, the only thing I would say is back to the bonuses. I think there's 2 ways to really look at that you want to consider. Are you going to do your bonus based off of the potential annual revenue? Or are you going to do it where essentially they start at 0 every month? So the quota is smaller, but you're actually incenting them on new seats every month. And I think those are sort of, in my head, the 2 ways to look at that when you're building out that sales structure for your team.
Perfect. Thank you, Heather. Okay, so we've talked about the business overall and those 4 key areas that we talked about. So if we actually bring that and look at it from a technical perspective, now this is really high level, and I think that this nicely and easily kind of sums up exactly what we're talking about from this perspective. Is don't deliver someone else's food, cook your own. So you don't want to be the Uber driver delivering the Uber Eats, but actually you want to create and build those services yourself with your own IP wrapped around whatever it is in terms of the vendor offering, and actually start becoming a proper IT expert, going from that one-time consultant to an ongoing administrator and wrapping your value around, as I say, that vendor offering and creating your own USPs in this space. So in terms of developing that strategy, Heather, I think you were going to take that.
Yeah, definitely. So when you think of your go-to-market plan, there's a couple things you have to understand. And one is when you're moving from that traditional VAR space, historically people focused on the products they were selling and the technology. When you're moving to a CSP or an MSP model, more so the MSP model, you're focusing on the solutions, but more the people in your organization and what they enable partners to become. So it's a different model because you're now moving from focusing on technology and product to focusing on solutions and services, which is way different. With that, there's a couple things you want to be aware of. The first is you really need to know your audience. And what I mean by that, and I always tell people, when you talk to everybody, you reach nobody. And what that means is if you try to be all things to all people, you actually lose credibility in the area that you may focus in. So think through, there's an exercise you can do. It's called a social graph where you actually look on your social media channels, who do you influence there and what do they care about? If you target those specific people, by default, they're going to share your information, expand your messaging, expand your presence. When those people see it, they're going to share it with somebody else. Where if you're more of a generalist and you just focus on everything, that message isn't going to matter to anybody and they're not going to share it. The next thing is really understand who your competition is and what your value is in the market. A little thing that I think is going to happen for MSPs and CSPs in the future is that when you look at your competitors, historically, those may in the future become your business partners to expand your solutions. So understand what other people do well, what you do well, and what differentiates you. But also think about how you can partner with other people to become larger than you really are in the space. And then from a go-to-market planning, really, you have to develop SMART goals. So if you don't know what a SMART goal is, you probably should go look it up and memorize it, but I am going to tell you here. It's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And I can give you a real life example of a consulting job I was working on where I was helping somebody with their go-to-market strategy and annual business planning. We got down to what their goal was for the year. It was they wanted to do in the first quarter, which that was timely, they wanted to close $2 million. Well, it actually was doable with the solution we were talking about if they already had something in pipeline. But what we were talking about had really a 6-month sales cycle. They didn't have anything already in that cycle. So by default, they were never going to be able to hit that goal. So it wasn't attainable. And they really needed to go back to the drawing board and figure out how do we change our strategy to make that attainable going forward. So don't discount the way that you structure your goals before you even build out that marketing plan to make sure you can hit those and that it's relevant.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Heather. So we're getting to the important part of the on-demand webinar today. So that is why the change. So actually, this is my favorite slide from the whole deck. We talked about the technical slide earlier on and how we kind of succinctly explained just in that one slide. Well, we can do exactly the same for the overall proposition here, just with these words: stop hunting and start farming. But actually, what are we talking about? So from the hunting perspective, you're probably used to going out there and hunting for that big deal, and you spend a lot of time and effort going after that one big deal. Once you've closed it, you're then moving on and you're on the hunt for the next big deal. And in fact, you've also got to bear in mind that once you've done that acquisition in a year's time or in 2 years' time, you're then going to have to spend time, energy, and resources in terms of actually renewing that deal. So that's what we talk about from a hunting perspective. But actually, To start farming is to focus on the MSP and the monthly recurring revenue. Now, obviously, yes, we want you to be able to go out there and win net new customers. That is important to an organization, obviously. But let's start farming those MSPs. We've got that monthly recurring revenue coming, but how can you continue to wrap your own IP, your own services around? How can you go to market with additional add-ons and actually increase the amount of monthly recurring business that you're actually seeing from those organizations? And the fact that this is also evergreen, there are no renewals at all. You're not having to spend that additional time and resource that we just touched on in going back into that customer base just to kind of secure that renewal. This keeps on ticking away and is evergreen, as I mentioned. Heather, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, the only thing when you really break it down, I think about when you think about hunting for new deals with the MSP model, you're planting seeds with new customers that then you go and cultivate those and grow your crop. And that would be all I would add.
Perfect. Thank you. So in terms from a financial and a funding perspective, now this is actually from the end user orientation. So we've got the CapEx and the OpEx. So CapEx is capital expenditure, OpEx operational expenditure. So from CapEx, that's generally 25% of annual budget. It's paid up front. Now we find with this model, there's generally increased negotiations because they are having to commit to the 1 year, the 2 year, or the 3 years. So that can actually erode any margin that you might be able to make because the customer is going to be constantly kind of pushing you down, trying to get that best deal. If you look at the OpEx model, it actually taps into the OpEx budget, which is generally around about 75% of the budget. You can pay over time, so there's not that big upfront commitment that we talked about. And we actually see that it reduces the number of negotiations required. And actually, doing it this way, you're not creating a compelling event for the customer to actually look at your competitors, any vendor competitors, and actually start those conversations again at renewal time, because as I say, this is a monthly, this is a pay-as-you-go, and this is coming out of that operational expense. So it's much more straightforward and easier for the end user to actually consume.
And the only thing I would, only thing I would add to that is when you look at the world we're in today, when big events happen and there's constraints, the first thing that people cut typically in organizations is going to be from that CapEx budget. They aren't going to cut from the budget that helps them keep the lights on every day. So the more that you can transition from CapEx to OpEx, your risk is actually diminished as far as losing sales, losing deals, because you're hitting that operational line.
Perfect. Thank you. So on to the kind of specific benefits, if you like, from a monthly recurring revenue model, and it is a continuous cycle. So to start, it is a predictable revenue stream. Okay, so we're not doing annual deals anymore, all the 2 or the 3 year deals. So we're not getting those binary spikes, so to speak. So you can really understand and plan and budget for your business moving forward, because as we say, it is predictable, and that monthly recurring revenue is going to keep coming in. As long as you've got no churn and you're increasing the amount of customers or the amount of add-ons, then you should see that growing every single month. It's a decreased cost of sale, as I say, and on the slide we were talking about earlier, this is evergreen, so you're not having to redeploy any resources to actually go back into that customer base at renewal time. We also touched on in the slide earlier about the reduced pricing negotiation. So these, as I say, are all the benefits of that monthly recurring revenue and increased customer retention. You're not giving them a reason to start looking around in the market. Now, obviously, you need to ensure that you're delighting your customers by giving them good offerings and good service. And with that, on top of the fact that they have that pay-as-you-go monthly recurring, then the customer retention is increased and churn is reduced. No cost to repurchase. I think that's kind of self-explanatory when we talked about the renewal side of things. And then also because there are no renewals and there's no barrier, and they can carry on consuming and have that usage flexing up and down as their wants and needs change. Heather, anything from you on that one?
No, I think you covered it all.
Good stuff. Okay, so the rule of 78. Now, this actually is my favorite thing, if there is such a thing, with regards to a monthly recurring revenue business. Now, I actually call this the power of 78. And basically, a lot of organizations that do run a subscription offering and a subscription business will actually use this to forecast what they're going to do on a yearly basis. Now, this is a pretty simple and straightforward example, but at the top here, you can see the amount of net new business that they want to add each month. Now, obviously, you can tailor that exactly to the customer base that you've already got today and the business that you're already doing today. But as long as you can manage your churn, and if you're adding, in this example, $100 every single month, then actually the rule of 78 is about the amount of invoicing touch points that you'll see through the period of that 12 months. So actually adding just 100 per month, well, you're going to be generating 7,800 in that year. Now, that is just an example, but I've worked with organizations that have done this, and their monthly recurring revenue when we first start with maybe 2,000 euros. By the end of that financial year, they're up at the 85,000 euros. So you can really see how that swells, and it actually becomes a real juggernaut of revenue within your organization. So this really is a visual representation of what we've just talked about in terms of the rule of 78. So obviously your business connected with your customer and you're selling them the cloud security for MSP. But actually, if you start talking about the add-ons, you can see how that monthly recurring revenue really swells and really grows, and obviously your profitability along with that. In this example here, if you look at the right-hand side, we talk about just an MSP solution specifically. So maybe they're only taking one product from your portfolio. And the monthly recurring revenue on that is $10,000. Now, we talked about earlier as an organization, how you make that change and how you actually start recognizing your revenue, how you're going to incentivize your salespeople. But if we are going to go down the monthly route, then okay, so it is 10K, but we know that then that's going to be 120 for the year, 360 for the 3 years. But actually, if you can just apply one add-on or one additional service from your portfolio or another vendor, then that really can massively amplify and significantly increase the amount of business that you're generating. And as I say, just keep using that rule of 78, keep satisfying the customers that you've got, keep pushing on that monthly subscription, and keep focusing on increasing and farming into that customer base, and you'll see your revenues grow. And the final slide, we talked about some of the tools for your success. So you'll have access to this deck and you'll be able to select this link. And behind that, we have got a transition guide. Heather, did you want to talk about that guide a bit more specifically?
Yeah, so we call it our Padlet, or the platform is the Padlet that it lives on. But what it's going to do is break down what we went through in this training into little bite-sized pieces, so you can reference that as you're starting to map out what your transition looks like from a traditional model to a CSP or a CSP to MSP model. So it's your quick, easy to use, one-stop shop reference guide moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you, Heather, and thank you everybody for your attention. I hope you found this on-demand webinar of use. If you've got any questions, then you know where to find us.